Hello, it's John Heaton, and I'm going to do part 4 of my top 100 solo Beatles songs. Just before I start, a bit of a few stats that I put together. I'll talk about that more at the end, but I did count up how many songs I had from each Beatle, and John ended up, I'll give the game away here, John ended up with 26, Paul with 33, George with 28, and Ringo with 14, which makes 101. As I said in the last video, I double counted number 50. So I've ended up with 101, which sounds a bit like something from 1984, but it's meant in a positive way here. And but the reason John has less than Paul and George is because he only had 11 years of active solo, or potentially active solo careers before he was killed. And whereas Paul, there's 54 years to choose from, and George had 32 years to choose from, even though he wasn't active for a lot of the last 10 years of his life, for example. Ringo, again, more than 50 years to choose from. So, yes, Paul has the most tracks, but I don't think it's a surprise, really. The most popular albums, or the most popular choice, had 8 tracks from it. The second one had 7. There's 2 albums with 6, 3 with 5, 4 with 4, and 4 with 3, and then 6 with 2, and 10 with 1. So 31 albums are featured in my list, and I'll tell you the most popular albums at the end. But let's get on to the top 25, shall we? And number 25, we've got Eat at Home from the Ram album. Just a lovely, funky song. They get a really good sound on here, and it's a good feel-good number with sort of fun lyrics, and one of my favourites on Ram. Number 24. This is a cover song. Might surprise some of you that I've included it, but I absolutely love it so much I had to include it. And it's Boney Maroney from Lennon's rock and roll album 75. I think it's very passionately sung. I love the words. I love the way they've slowed down the tempo. I love Phil Spector's production. I just think it's a really strong track, and I love that crunchy guitar in the background as well, or not really in the background, in the foreground, should we say. Number 23, the title track from All Things Must Pass from George Harrison. What can one say about this track? It's superlative. It's just wonderful, and it's a real shame the Beatles didn't make more of an effort collectively with the song, because they could have. Well, maybe it doesn't matter, because George did a sensational job on his own. So maybe it he gets the deserved solo credit for this song. It's just wonderful. 22, Isn't It a Pity from the same album, All Things Must Pass, and wonderful string arrangement on this from John Barham. Great production, lovely use of acoustic guitars, like George together with the members of Badfinger strumming away. They've got really sort of full sound and really interesting chords. I think it was Jeff Lynne was saying that he found the chords of this song very interesting. They're not just sort of major or minor thirds and fifths. We're talking seriously complicated chords. Lovely one to play on the guitar or the piano. Number 21, big contrast to that previous song. It's got Cold Turkey from John, his song about heroin withdrawal, written in the autumn of '69. And he pulls no punches on the subject matter, and it's a very passionate song and very heartfelt and very honest, and probably too honest in terms of it being a huge hit. It probably didn't get played a lot on the radio because it's not that commercial, but it's a very powerful song, and Eric Clapton's on hand to play guitar with John, Klaus Voormann on bass, and Ringo on drums. And John had actually offered this to the other Beatles as a potential new single, and they'd politely, all of them said no, apparently. It's number 20, we've got Oh My Love from Imagine, co-written with Yoko. John and Yoko co-wrote this song, lovely tune, lovely words, very sensitive guitar from George Harrison on this track, and John's accompanying himself on the piano, beautiful melody. Number 19, Mull of Kintyre from Paul, Wings, single, late November '77, a huge hit all over Europe, and I think Australia and places like that, but in America they didn't even push it as the A-side, and so it's not well-known track in America, but I think it's a great track. And my friend Dave Costello was saying it reminds him of at a time when Mike Yarwood was on the TV and things were a little less complicated and simpler, when I wouldn't say it's part of my childhood because I was 13 when this song came out, but you know what I mean, those early years before life starts happening to you, and when things are a bit simpler, and one gets very nostalgic. I certainly do, listening to this track. Could have been higher for sure. Number 18, we've got Give Me Some Truth from John on Imagine, rehearsed by the Beatles in Twickenham and passed over, and presumably if they'd stayed together it could have well featured on a future album. It's a very strong track, and it's a little bit biting and vindictive, but it's passionately sung, and there's a great message behind it. And this was at a time when John was, a lot of rock stars were having digs at politicians such as Richard Nixon, and it was in the middle of Vietnam. There was a lot of cynicism, well, there still is, I suppose, about politicians, but particularly in the late 60s. I'm Carrying from London Town is number 17. Beautiful song, just Paul and his acoustic guitar strumming away, and you can just imagine him on the deck of the boat in the Virgin Islands with the ocean surrounding him and the sun and maybe the odd seagull, and him just playing this beautiful song. I absolutely love it to bits. Number 16, a happy-go-lucky track from Ringo, Snookeroo, written by Elton John and Bernie Taupin. Wonderful song, wonderful tune, sort of words, sort of little bit about Ringo's childhood, but not to the letter. Just an amusing song and a very good feel-good song. There's a few albums on this list where if you're a little bit depressed and you want a bit of cheering up, you just put on a song like this. Great. Robbie Robertson, rest in peace, died recently playing the guitar solo. Number 15, we've got God from John Lennon, Plastic Ono Band, and it's just a wonderfully powerful message. And I love the listening when he's going through all the stuff he doesn't believe in. But I think the strongest bit of the song is the last verse, the dream is over. And what can I say? The dream is over. Yesterday I was the dreamer, but now I'm reborn. I was the walrus, but now I'm John. So, dear friends, you'll just have to carry on. The dream is over. It's just sensational and lovely tune and great piano from Billy Preston. Number 14, we've got My Sweet Lord from George Harrison. Again, lovely. I just want to point out the sort of massive acoustic guitars on this track. Was George with the Badfinger guys, maybe overdubbed a couple of times, and it sounds like a whole army of people singing this song and playing on this song. A really big sounding record, and regardless of its similarities to the He's So Fine song, which it is similar to melody wise, it's a much better record. And it just packs a punch spiritually. It's just wonderful. Number 13, we've got With a Little Luck from Paul from London Town, one of my all-time favourites. Slightly disappointed, I remember, when it only got to number 5 in the charts, following Mull of Kintyre's huge 9 weeks at number 1, the previous single. But lovely use of synthesizer on this track, and lovely vocals from Paul, and with Linda and Denny, the true signature Wings sound. Number 12, we've got Love from Plastic Ono Band. Just a really simple song and a great idea of Phil Spector to play piano to accompany John's guitar. So lovely, heartfelt, simple words, but effective, and beautiful tune. Number 11, Maybe I'm Amazed from Paul. For some reason not released as a single off the first album, McCartney, but it's in most people's top Paul songs of all time, including the Beatles. It's just a sensational song, and a lovely message and love song to Linda, who he'd just obviously not been with for long, and he was going through the whole of the Beatles breakup, and Linda was keeping him going, and this was a real rock in his life. When it was a difficult time for Paul, the split, and she got him through it basically. So really heartfelt song, beautiful. Number 10, we got Photograph from Ringo, co-written with George Harrison from the Ringo album 1973, and just wonderful and lovely harmony vocal from George Harrison, and lovely uplifting sort of Harrison-esque melody. One has to imagine that George probably wrote most of the tune, and Ringo sort of helped out with the words, I would guess. I don't know that for sure. Number 9, we've got Imagine from John, and I've heard this song so many times over the years, and I've played it so many times on the piano, and I'm still not bored of it, which says a lot for the song in my opinion, because there's other songs which I've heard to death over the years, and which didn't even make this list, but this song will always be in my top songs of all time, not just Beatles solo songs of all time. I just love the fact that Lennon's playing the sort of low octave piano, because they tried a few arrangements of it, and you can hear them on the box set, and they really didn't get a good feel for the song until that final decision to take the piano down an octave, and lovely string arrangement, and just beautifully sung, and just a tune to die for, and a great message. And he's not saying he has the answer, he's just asking us to imagine a better world, and there's nothing wrong with that. Number 8, we've got Run of the Mill from George. All Things Must Pass track, very nice words. Some people say they were aimed at McCartney, I'm not sure about that, but everyone has choice when to and not to raise their voice, it's you that decides. Only you arrive at your own made end, with no one but yourself to be offended, it's you that decides. Lovely words. I think Patty was saying it was one of her favourites, or if not her favourite of George's. Number 7, we've got Let Me Roll It from Paul from Band on the Run, another song which I've heard a lot of times over the years, but is just a really strong track. And when Paul came up with that riff, he must have been very pleased, because it is a great riff. And yeah, what can I say, wonderful, and great words as well. And you could see it as a kind of fig leaf of peace to John after slagging each other off for a couple of years. This was like, I think I've always read it as that, but maybe Paul didn't completely intend it that way, but the fans are entitled to read opinions into songs such as that, I think. Number 6, we've got Give Me Love, the lead-off single and first track off Living in a Eternal World from George Harrison. Lovely spiritual message, beautiful guitar playing, great tempo changes, great chord changes, great piano from Nicky Hopkins. Just a wonderful record, and a deserved huge hit on both sides of the Atlantic, number 1, I think. Number 5, we've got Nobody Told Me, another one of those happy-go-lucky tracks where if you need cheering up, you can put this song on and it will do the trick. He was going to give this one to Ringo, but I think it's too good to give away, and this was not released in his lifetime, of course. For some reason held over for Milk and Honey, and not featured on Double Fantasy, although it is one of my all-time favourite John Lennon songs. Number 4, we got Watching the Wheels. His kind of answer to the critics and the fans who were saying, what are you doing in those 5 years off, including me, because I remember being a bit disgruntled that when I first got into the Beatles, John was completely silent, and had been since Walls and Bridges. And George was pretty quiet. Ringo was putting out the odd album, but it was only really Paul who was active, so I was a bit frustrated. So this was John's answer to that, and of course he then made his famous comeback in 1980, and all was right again for a few weeks anyway. So number 3, we've got Every Night from McCartney. Beautiful song, beautiful melody, well played, and I remember one review saying that the arrangement is not very sophisticated and Phoebe Snow did a better version of it. Well, I disagree. I think this is perfect, doesn't need anything more than what Paul supplied, and he's playing drums behind his own guitar and bass, and it just doesn't need anything, any more embellishment, in my opinion. Number 2, we've got Woman from John Lennon, 1980. You know, for me, this is probably the ultimate love song of all time. And he said it's for Yoko, but it's for all women. And just really sort of self-deprecating words about how much he owes Yoko and how much she's done for him. And after all, it was written in the stars. And just wonderful harmony. He harmonises with himself on the last verse. And he's got a couple of singers to help him beef up the sound as well, and it's just a really wonderfully produced record by John, Yoko and Jack Douglas. Number 1, can you guess? We've got Blow Away from George Harrison, 1979, the lead-off single from the George Harrison self-titled album. This got to number 14 in the US, didn't do anything in the UK. I remember being very disappointed by that, but that doesn't reflect the quality of the song at all. It just reflects, at the time, a lot of stuff was going on in the music business, such as punk and stuff, and maybe George Harrison was not the most fashionable person to go out and buy records of, but I think this is a wonderful message. Again, there's another one of those uplifting songs. All it takes is some warmth to make it blow away, blow away, blow away, meaning the clouds and the rain, it'll stop and the sun will come out. And thinking about it, quite a similar message to Here Comes the Sun. So anyway, that was my list. I'll just quickly show you that top 25. I probably didn't agree with it. That's fine. It's just my opinion, nothing important, and you've all got yours, and that's fine. And as I said at the beginning, there's a lot of songs which didn't even make the list, such as My Love, Instant Karma, New York City, Nobody Loves You When You're Down and Out, One of These Days, Heart of the Country, all big favourites of mine. Didn't make the list. I was dividing up the songs by decades. I've got one song from the 60s, it's called Turkey. 12 songs from the 80s, I think, or was it 11? Maybe I miscounted it. 2 from the 90s, both Ringo tracks, and a staggering 86 from the 70s. Well, those of you who've watched my channel know why that is. I'm always a big fan of the 70s in general. It's probably where 90% of my record collection is from. So the 6 albums which featured 2 tracks and the 10 albums which featured 1 track are here. 1 track is here, so you can have a quick look at that. So a lot of albums didn't even feature any tracks at all, such as McCartney 2 was unlucky to miss out, because One of These Days was on the list, and I withdrew it at the last minute, I think, when I discovered I'd missed out some very important song. So the albums which did the best, 4 albums with 3 tracks, Walls and Bridges, Wings at the Speed of Sound, Tug of War and Ram. 4 albums with 4 tracks, Living in the Material World from George, Mind Games from John, Band on the Run from Paul McCartney and Wings, and the Ringo album. 3 albums with 5 songs, McCartney from 1970, London Town from Wings 78, and Double Fancy / Milk and Honey. I've counted it as 1 album for these purposes. 2 albums with 6 songs, John Lennon, Plastic Ono Band and Imagine. 1 album with 7 songs, self-titled George Harrison, and then 1 with 8 songs, All Things Must Pass. And it's not really a surprise that All Things Must Pass should come top, because there's so many, it's packed full of great stuff, particularly on the main 4 sides. So those are the albums that featured on my list. Yours would feature a completely different selection, but that's great. And I hope you enjoyed the series, and thanks for watching. See you next time.